Excellent. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for logging in wherever you may be. We just want to welcome you all, of course, to another session. And we have a very, very special guest today. But before I introduce our special guest, I want to thank you all. And just remember that at any point that a question arises, please chat it in the chat box section and we will get to your question. And also, we do have other social platforms that you see on our channel. Feel free to follow, to subscribe to anything so that way you're always informed about the new sessions that we have upcoming and our schedule. All right, without any further ado, today's session will be on health awareness and it's on stress management and resilience. And we have a special guest. Her name is Dr. Danielle Kaleko. Dr. Danielle Kaleko, if you don't mind introducing yourself to everyone.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Caputo. My name's Danielle Kaleko. I am a pharmacist as well as a health economist, and I'm the executive director of the Komodo Family Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization that's based in Bakersfield, California, so a couple hours north of LA. And our mission is to promote equity and connect under-resourced communities with healthcare access and access to social resources. My pronouns are she, her, and sha. Sha is a gender-neutral pronoun in Tagalog, which is my ancestral language of the Philippines.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Excellent.
You want me to do the presentation or?
Yeah, beforehand, I just wanted to let everybody know, please, everybody in the chat community, give a warm welcome. Just go crazy on the chat and send some love to Dr. Kaleko.
Thank you. Thank you
so
much.
You got it. Without any further ado, take it away.
Okay, great. So, I mentioned a little bit about our organization. We're based in Bakersfield, which is in Kern County. Chances are if you've ever eaten grapes before, it was probably grown and harvested by the people of Kern County, California. And some of the work streams that we do include assistance programs. So we have an affordable medications program, which helps lower the cost of people's medicines. We provide educational programming. So this is one example of education. And we do research in collaboration with the community to identify, what the unmet needs are of the community and how we can help them, live better and live well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and my organization. So before we jump into the meat of this presentation today, I thought I would start with some affirmations. And these were specifically written by and for Black and Indigenous and other people of color. I know we're going through a lot right now. These are stressful times. The news cycle is very, there's a lot of tragedy and a lot of violence happening in the world. So if you don't mind joining me, you feel free to say these out loud with me. I know you're all on mute, so we can't hear you. Don't worry about it. But yeah, let's go ahead and start. So I am precious. I am valuable. I am tender. I am resilient. I am human. I am grieving. I am magical. And I am fun-loving. I deserve protection. I deserve to take up space. I deserve to be nurtured. I deserve to rest. I deserve compassion. I deserve to heal. I deserve to be celebrated. And I deserve to experience joy. So if you would, just take a minute and let those words sink in. And maybe reflect for a moment and think about people in your life who may have said some of these things to you or similar things to you, and the people who have loved you into being. And if nobody has said things like this to you before, then I'm telling you now that you are worthy just exactly the way you are. So with that, I want to acknowledge that we are living through some really stressful times right now. As I mentioned, the world is going through a lot. Not only are we dealing with the global pandemic of COVID-19, which is already a lot to deal with, but we are also dealing with this global reckoning with our racist history as a country, right? A lot of the injustices in the world. On top of all of that, we might have other sources of stress things going on in our immediate family, maybe our social circles, the pressures of school, and for some of us, work as well. So there's a lot of different sources of stress, and I want to acknowledge that it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. So hopefully today I'll give you some tools to help cope with some of that. So I want to start out by distinguishing the difference between what's a healthy level of pressure versus an unhealthy level of stress. So a little bit of pressure is actually a good thing. Let's say you have a deadline coming up next week, you have a paper due, or you've got a test coming around the corner. Having that sense of urgency can actually motivate you. It can help you to focus a little bit better and realize, you need to focus and study and get this paper out the door, right? And that can actually enhance your performance in some ways. However, when the level of pressure or stress becomes excessive, then it can start to have a negative impact on our physical health as well as our mental health. So what I want to do is introduce to you this idea of resilience. And resilience is really the capacity to recover from difficulty. And it's really encapsulated by this symbolism of the lotus flower. So this lotus flower looks really beautiful, right? You take a look at it, it's really pretty. But what do you think lies beneath the surface of that water? So the reality of the lotus flower is that its roots are inside the dirtiest, muddiest water. And that's really the way that it thrives. So as humans, all of us suffer and all of us experience difficulty and pain. It's really the one thing that unites all of us. And yet rooted in all of that pain and suffering, all of us have the ability to heal and to rise above that experience. And we can actually become better people as a result of it, because we get this thing called empathy, or the ability to feel for other people's pain, right? And so even those of us who may have survived traumatic experiences, even we have the capacity to be able to heal from that. Now, I want to emphasize the point that resilience does not mean just continuing to push through the pain, even after you've reached your breaking point. So resilience, I will go over this in the next several slides. It really is about setting healthy boundaries and knowing when it's time to rest. So when we talk about strategies of how to improve our resilience, we think about this acronym called BURN, B-U-R-N, Build Your Resilience Now. And the B in BURN stands for boundaries. So that's drawing boundaries around yourself. That means knowing when to say no and knowing when to stop and rest. And that requires developing assertive communication skills. So I'm going to give you a few examples of what that might look like in a minute. The B also stands for being present. That means being right here in the current moment, whether it's during class time or when you're in a conversation with somebody or you're eating a meal or what have you. It's being in that moment. So when it comes to setting healthy boundaries, I'm going to give you the example of having discussions around racism, because this is on a lot of our minds right now. And let's say somebody is trying to pick an argument with you about racism, or somebody is invalidating your personal experiences or whatnot. So here's some examples of setting boundaries and assertively communicating with them. You can tell them, I'm not going to engage in a debate to prove my experiences with you. Or I don't have the capacity to teach you right now, but you can go online and there's some great resources for you. What you just said is not sitting well with me. I would like to revisit this after I've had a chance to process it. Or just because I'm a Black or Indigenous or other person of color does not make me obligated to talk about racism with you. You can tell them very honestly too, this conversation is exhausting me, right? And I would like for us to change the subject, because this topic can really wear down on us, right? And then finally, I am aware of the injustice against my people. Do not send me re-triggering videos or news, because I know that this stuff is circulating around social media. There is a lot of traumatic imagery going around, and people do not need to continue sharing that. Yeah. So those are some examples of assertive communication and boundary setting. Now, the other thing that we talked about was being present. So what that means is really living in the moment, as opposed to thinking about what happened in the past or what, what you're going to do in the future. So this idea of mindfulness, some people might think, oh, this is something for like rich white people, it's not for me. No, actually, mindfulness is for all of us, it's for everybody. And so the easiest way to practice this is to focus on your breath. So simply thinking to yourself when you're inhaling and breathing in and breathing out, and breathing in and breathing out. And you don't have to change the breath in any way or manipulate it. You just simply have to think to yourself and focus on the fact that you're breathing in and out. And what that does is it really forces you to come back to the present moment of what's happening in the here and now. A lot of times when you start to do stuff like this, your mind will continue to move from place to place, and it will wander around. And that's natural and it's okay. So don't beat yourself up when that happens. Just simply call your attention back to the breath. Another way to practice mindfulness is stepping outdoors for a moment. So you could either go for a walk or just sit outside, or even just open a window and let some fresh air in and sit by that window. And when you do that, really pay attention to your senses. So think, am I feeling the sun on my face? Am I feeling the breeze on my skin? Do I hear birds or, cars going by, or voices, people talking or laughing and stuff like that? And again, when you're paying attention to those senses and what's happening in the moment, that is really going to bring you back into the present. So this is a practice. And it's not something that you become an expert at immediately, but if you continue doing it on a regular basis, it's a tool in your toolbox that you can come back to at any time. So the next letter in our acronym of BURN is U, and that stands for understanding what fills your cup. So these are activities that you might find enjoyable, that bring you joy, that help you recharge your batteries, or even acknowledging that a lot of us might be feeling a lot of difficult feelings right now, whether it's anger or rage or sadness and grief too. What can we do to help cope with those difficult emotions, right? So, for me, I take some free Zoom boxing classes where we just punch the air. She leads us through different punching exercises. You don't need any equipment, just an internet connection. There's YouTube videos on this as well. You could also use a pillow, punching a pillow, even screaming into a pillow. Or, let's say you're alone in your car, you can scream in your car, and those are all healthy ways to release anger. And then sadness and grief. Know that it's okay to cry. No matter who you are, how old you are, how feminine or masculine you identify as, everybody cries, and that's completely natural. Also, just things that you might enjoy. Like I have a 5-year-old kid, she loves to color. Sometimes I'll color with her, stuff like that. So this might look different for everybody depending on what you enjoy, what you like doing. Esports, right? You're an esports community. So we provided you with a worksheet, and you can feel free to do this as you follow along, or you can do it after the session. But I've prompted you to write down 3 to 5 of your favorite activities that bring you joy or help you recharge your batteries. And then try and really think, what can you realistically schedule into your calendar and make it a priority? Because these are things that really, help you to reset and build your resilience. Okay, so the next letter in our acronym is R, and R stands for relationships. So reflecting on the people in our lives, right? Think about the people in your life who love you and who uplift you. And that might be your biological family, it might be your chosen family, it might be people in this esports community. So it's important to find, who those people are and connect with them. And in those relationships, it's very important to be ourselves, to be authentic, right? To be real, and also to be vulnerable. So that means that it's okay to have your feelings, to express your feelings and be honest, in front of these folks if you have that trustworthy relationship with them. And that you'll find that actually grows your connection with people and it deepens your relationship. Also within relationships is mentorship. So, I think some of you folks are fortunate to have a mentor at CSUDH, or maybe you have a mentor in some other organization. And so mentorship is one way to really, just help you navigate the world, because there's a lot, there's a lot out there. And so having a mentor that can help you, just get through different obstacles or give you advice when you need it can be so helpful. R also stands for recognizing what you can control in your life versus what you can't. And I'll talk more about that in a second. And the last thing it stands for is rest, which is so important. So when it comes to recognizing what's in your control versus what's outside of your control, I think a lot of us have this tendency to focus a lot of time and energy on things we have zero control over. It might be what other people are saying, how they're reacting to us. Maybe it's some past decisions that we've made, in the past, or what people think about us. We have zero control over that. But what we do have control over is our own actions, right? It's how are we spending our time? What are we prioritizing? What accounts are we following and unfollowing on social media? What are we consuming as far as like those ideas? And is that healthy for us? What are we eating and how are we taking care of our bodies? Things like that. So if we focus most of our attention on things that are within our control, and we recognize that we have zero control over the rest of it, then that can also be very freeing to us. So on the topic of rest, I want to talk about sleep hygiene. So this sleep hygiene just means bedtime routines for healthy sleep habits. One of the primary aspects of good sleep hygiene involves turning off our devices at least a half hour, maybe more so, before bed. Because that blue light and also just the stimulation of consuming stuff on our phones is going to keep us up and is going to disturb our sleep. Also, trying to go to bed and get up around the same time each day is also really helpful in terms of making sure we get a good night's sleep. Try to avoid, studying or doing work in the bed, because that's going to make you associate that space with working and thinking, and that's going to prevent you from having a restful time. And then having just basically a quiet routine right before bedtime. So that might be reading a book, it might be drinking some chamomile tea. So having that, ritual that relaxes you and like really grounds you before bedtime can also help as well. So on your worksheet, we prompted you to think about one trusted person in your life that you can turn to for either help, advice, or just a listening ear. And please write their name down. And then also think about one thing that is within your control that you would like to change. So maybe it has something to do with daily habits. Maybe it's some accounts on social media you need to unfollow, setting boundaries with a person in your life, or voting and civic engagement. So, one thing that I found in my hometown of Santa Clarita is that it's the young people, it's the youth, it's the high school students and the college students that are leading the charge in, getting involved in the community. So whether it's organizing the protests, or they're even sitting in on the city council meetings, they're emailing the mayor and having meetings. These city council meetings are happening on Zoom now, but you can go in and ask, to give public comment and have your voice be heard, because part of self-care is also engaging with your community and trying to be the change that you want to see. So that's another way. And then the last letter in our acronym of BURN is N. So that stands for new experiences and also the power of now. So, taking action that you want to see now, or maybe changing those habits now, or having difficult conversations that you need to have with people in your life now. So the last thing we're asking you to do on your worksheet is to list one new experience that you would like to try within the next couple of weeks. So it might be something as simple as a new book that you've had on your list for a while but haven't gone around to reading, or trying out a new exercise, or again, a specific action that you might want to take in terms of getting involved in your community, whether it's, your city leadership or your school leadership or something like that. So now I want to talk along the lines of self-care. I want to talk about therapy. So what is therapy, right? Like, I want right now to get rid of the idea that this is something that's shameful or that should be swept under the rug or that is embarrassing or something that we need to hide, because honestly, therapy is for everybody, okay? And there is no shame or stigma in seeing a therapist. Also, it's not a last resort thing. Really, it's not. Everybody can benefit from therapy. I personally have been seeing a therapist since last year. And my only regret was not starting 20 years ago when I was in high school, because I was already having some symptoms of depression, when I was like 16 years old. And honestly, since starting therapy, I have found a weight lifted off my shoulders, because what it does is it's a way to process difficult emotions. It's a way to get tools to be able to cope, with difficult situations that come up in your life. Maybe you've had previous traumatic experiences. It's a way to help you, deal with that and resolve that in a healthy way. And it just, it gives you relief and allows you to grow. And it also improves your relationships with the people around you as well. So also, as a side note, there's a lot of people who benefit from a combination of therapy and medication. Some people just therapy by itself. So it's different for everybody. It depends on the individual. And this might change over the course of your lifetime as well. So that's something to just keep in mind. So how to find a mental health professional. If you're a student at CSU Dominguez Hills, you have the health center and they have psychological services available by phone and video conferencing. Otherwise, if you have health insurance or your parents have health insurance and you're part of their plan, you can always call the insurance company and ask them about what are the covered mental health options. Just so you know, right now, a lot of insurance companies, because of the coronavirus pandemic, are offering zero copay therapy. And a lot of it is, via video apps, so you can do this remotely. And it's becoming more and more common and more accessible than ever. Psychologytoday.com is another way that you can search for mental health professionals by zip code. You can filter by insurance, specialty areas, race, ethnicity, gender, language, sexual orientation, and other things as well. Many of the federally qualified health clinics, the free health clinics, also offer mental health services. Just a couple of examples: Shields for Families and Rhodes Community Care Clinic. And then online, Ayana Therapy is an app that was started by and for people of color. And so they have a multitude of therapists that are, therapists of color, therapists from the LGBTQ community, etc. And then on Instagram, there are these specific accounts that I recommend. There's a lot out there, but these are just some of the ones that you can follow for really helpful information in the Latinx and the Black communities specifically. If you need immediate assistance, these are some of the resources that are available to you. So there's the crisis text line. You can text HOME to 741-741. The Trevor Lifeline is specifically for the LGBTQ community. The Trans Lifeline is operated by and for the trans community specifically. And the Trans Lifeline will not call the police without your consent. So there's all these different kind of hotlines and text lines that are available to you to reach out for assistance, as well as these urgent psychiatric care facilities as well. So I want to talk a little bit about substance use. And what I mean by substances is everything from caffeine and alcohol to heroin and cocaine. So all of these are considered substances, right? And so it can be very tempting for us to try and self-medicate using substances that are readily available to us. Now, I want to make a note. If you have a legitimate prescription for like Xanax or ADHD medications or antidepressants or anything like that, that is completely legitimate, and that's different from, let's say, buying some pills from a friend or something like that. So all of these substances have short-term effects and long-term effects. So short-term effects are what you're going to immediately feel, in the short term after you take them. Long-term effects take longer, but this is stuff that can develop over time, over the years if you have continued use of these substances. So, under the stimulant category, let's say, caffeine, nicotine, stuff like that, the ADHD medications, these can help sharpen our concentration, maybe keep you awake to study longer and things like that. Under the depressant category, these can induce relaxation, reduce your inhibitions. But think also about the long-term effects as well. So many of these substances do cause dependency, physical dependency. So that means that your body requires these substances in order to continue functioning in the same way. Some of them also cause addiction. So the opioids, for instance, can be highly addictive. And then many of these substances can also cause heart problems, liver failure, seizures, and even death. So we know, for example, that cigarettes cause cancer and heart disease. This has been proven by many scientific studies. Alcohol is a known carcinogen. So we know that alcohol causes cancer as well as liver failure. Some of us, like myself, for instance, I have a family history, with a grandparent that had alcoholism. And so I know that addiction can run in my family. And so that actually helps to inform my own choices today. Vaping, so, the long-term effects of vaping are still being studied, and that depends on the exact substance that's being vaped. But we do know that nicotine, for instance, is highly addictive. It also reduces your immune response, which is not a great thing during a global pandemic of infectious disease. So would I sign myself up to be a human guinea pig in this experiment? Personally, I wouldn't. Opioids, as I mentioned, are highly addictive. There have been many lives that we know have been destroyed by addiction to opioids. So really, when it comes to opioids, these should be reserved only for very severe pain. So we're talking about pain associated with end-stage cancers, or serious operations, or over just a short period of time to recover from that operation. For other types of pain, high doses of ibuprofen or Motrin are actually just as effective to treat the pain itself, compared with opioids. When it comes to marijuana and CBDs, so let me talk about CBD for a minute because it's very popular. So there is strong scientific evidence that CBD works very well for childhood epilepsy, seizures. There is some evidence that CBD works for anxiety, insomnia, and pain. Some of the side effects associated with CBD might include nausea, fatigue, irritability. The one thing about CBD is that it is not FDA regulated like other medications are. And so what is unknown about CBD is how much active ingredient you have in that product versus unknown other stuff. So the thing about CBD, and when it's derived from a natural plant, right, is that there could be some contaminants like heavy metals and pesticides and things like that. So if you are, choosing to use CBD, I do recommend, consulting with a healthcare professional first. And if you do, use a licensed dispensary and ask them questions like this. How much THC is in the product? So THC is the psychoactive substance that can cause side effects like psychosis or paranoia and things like that. If it's a reputable dispensary, they are going to tell you, that they send their products off to an independent lab for analysis and that the THC levels have to fall within a certain amount. That's what I want to say about CBD. I personally don't use CBD products. I have, like I said, I have a therapist to manage my anxiety as far as like sleep. I use like the sleep hygiene techniques that I told you about. I've tried smoking marijuana before. It doesn't have any effect on me. So I don't benefit from that relaxation effect that a lot of people would get from it anyway. I also want to tell you a personal anecdote on caffeine and alcohol specifically. So when I was in pharmacy school, I had a pretty rigorous schedule. So I commuted 45 minutes to class. I had class from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Then I had to go to work from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. On some nights, I would then go out with friends afterwards and we'd be out till 2 a.m. So, and I also had a lot of extracurricular activities. So I used to drink a lot of caffeine. I used to drink Monster energy drinks on a regular basis, also coffee on top of that. When I went out with friends, I would sometimes binge drink. Um, and to this day, so I'm 36 years old now, I've cut out all energy drinks 12 years ago. And I still just have a little bit of coffee. But I have palpitations and arrhythmias in my heart. That means an irregular heartbeat. So I have to see a cardiologist to this day and take regular medication just to keep my heart rate under control. And that's just from just, caffeine and alcohol, two of the most accessible substances available with, very few regulations. So what I want to say is just because it's legal doesn't mean it's harmless. And also just because it's natural doesn't mean it's harmless either. So if I were to go back and do it again, I probably would have taken some responsibilities off of my plate. I would have practiced what I'm telling you today. I would have been setting healthy boundaries, knowing when to say no to additional volunteer opportunities, and really asking the question, if I'm going to take on a new responsibility, does this bring value to my life? And is it making a significant difference in the world? And if the answer is no, then my answer is no. So that's what I want to say about that. And then the last thing I want to say about substances and medications is I really encourage you to form a relationship with your pharmacist. Really ask them. Your pharmacist is your local medication expert. We go through a doctorate program for 4 years after college to know all about medications. And so find one that you trust. So it might not be the first one that you talk to, right? So similar to finding a therapist, it's a matter of finding somebody that you click with, that you feel like you can trust, and that you can have that relationship with. Let's see. Oops. Oh, there we go. Okay, so then I want to leave you with this note. When in doubt, you can always call on your ancestors. So whether you know their names and their faces, it doesn't matter. They know yours. So if you call on your ancestors, they will always show up for you. Think about everything that they had to endure and survive for you to be where you are today. You are made of strength and resilience. It's in your DNA. And with that, I want to say thank you for your time and attention. And here's how you can contact me and connect with me on social media.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kaleko, for sharing this session. And I know we're going to move into Q&A. There's some questions. I do want to share, just to note that these substances that were named earlier, these are illegal too for minors, right? That's just something that I want to throw in there as you hear them. And it's okay to be, informed and educated about it. That's why we are here as a network, as a community, to help bring awareness into this. So thank you. And I do have some questions here that we're going to get into, if that's okay.
Sure.
So Yusuf, if you'd like, we can transition to both myself and Dr. Kaleko. All right, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so thank you for everybody for sending all sorts of positive affirmations to what Dr. Kaleko was saying during the time of her session, and also for the questions. So if I may, Dr. Kaleko, ask you the questions that were posted on various chats.
Yeah.
The first one I have here is, what are some ways to deal with panic and anxiety attacks in public?
In public, yes. This is a very common scenario, actually, is having these panic attacks that happen. It seems like they happen at the most inopportune, times and places. And it's different for different people, but one immediate way to interrupt that is to try your best to take some deep breaths. So There's a technique, there's a breathing technique that they call square breathing. And I can kind of walk you through that. It's, you inhale for a count of 3, you hold the breath for a count of 3, you exhale for a count of 3, and hold it for a count of 3, and then repeat again. So you repeat that a few times, and you can actually increase the count. If you can do a count of 4, that can also, you can increase it as you go along. But that is one technique. Another technique that I have heard anecdotally works for some people is to literally get on the ground. They can sit down or even lie down flat on the ground. I know it's going to look weird, but if you're really having a panic attack, it might be, it gives some people like some real relief in that moment. And if you're with somebody that you trust that can like help kind of guide you and be with you in that moment, that also helps. I know some people don't like to be touched. Some people do want to be touched and be, for some people it really helps if they get like a really tight hug or squeeze from somebody, or you do this to yourself even. And that can help interrupt that in the moment. Wow. If this is happening on a regular basis though, I do recommend that you tell a healthcare professional about it. And so they can work with you on a more long-term basis to manage this.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And it just sounds like to me, Dr. Kaleko, just a comment, that a lot of this is just obtaining oxygen to the brain. It's almost like there's a shortage of it. And
part of it is that. And then also the breathing, slowing down and deepening the breathing will immediately activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your relax and digest side, right? As opposed to the fight or flight side, which is your sympathetic nervous system.
Amazing. Gosh. And I just can't help but when you're breathing, somebody may mention a comment, they couldn't help but do it with you too. It's almost like there's this mirror effect that happens when you're doing this in a state of, I'm trying to find relief in this stressful time.
Yes. And it's this is also a good technique to do before bedtime, to ground you and to get you in that state of relaxation before you get into bed.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm almost, as you're mentioning this, I'm almost thinking for the good of our community that's listening, tuning in, to almost do that before even entering the game space, right? To almost putting yourself in this virtual space, almost to start the practice of relaxation beforehand, so that we can actually be able to use that strength that we have to focus and concentrate into whatever study we're pursuing.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Please feel free to ask any questions too. So don't be afraid, don't be shy. And many of them shared with me. Thank you for sharing your story about the energy drink consumption. I think many of us are there. You know what I mean? Some of them are either we're just learning to wean off of it, or we're in that moment and having that inner struggle. Because there's a repeated cycle there that is very difficult. So what do you recommend if we're trying to adopt something new into a cycle that seems like it doesn't stop?
Yeah, this is very difficult. And I'll take the caffeine example specifically. This is something I had to taper off very slowly. So let's say you're used to consuming, let's say 2 energy drinks a day and a cup of coffee, just as an example. So you might start by, instead of 2 energy drinks, it's 1.5 energy drinks and that cup of coffee. And you stick with that for like a week. And then from there, you go down to like 1 energy drink and 1 cup of coffee for a week. But what you don't want to do is just cut it off cold turkey, because, well, 1, your body is going to revolt against you and you're going to feel awful and probably get right back on that same habit. Yeah. And 2, it's not sustainable over the long term. So if you do want to commit to tapering off your consumption of any substance, be it alcohol, caffeine, or whatnot, I recommend you do it really slowly, and maybe even keep a journal. So that way you're keeping track of your progress. it takes incremental steps, right? And it might seem like you're not doing much by just, cutting it down by a little bit, but those incremental steps add up over the long term to significant progress. Right now I'm down to half of a shot of an espresso each day. And that's the best I can do. I can't go cold turkey. I can't go without caffeine. I just can't function that way. But that's my new normal right now.
Right. All right. Thank you for that suggestion. Another question came in. Are there any meditation techniques that you would recommend?
Yes, yes. So my go-to is the breathing, focusing on the breathing. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And that's the simplest one, is literally just focusing on the breath. Another one that I really like is called metta meditation. And this is one that is from the Theravada Buddhist tradition. And metta meditation is having to do with wishing loving kindness on all beings. So, one way to start this is starting with yourself. You think to yourself, may I be well, may I be at peace, may I be free from suffering, and may I know true love and kindness. And then you extend that to the other people with you in the room. May you be well, may you be at peace, etc. And then you keep extending that out. Everybody in your home, everybody in your neighborhood, everyone in your city, your state, your country, the continent, the world, the universe. And if you can focus on that meditation, it can be actually really transformative.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I'd like to comment as well. You mentioned earlier too in your session about mindfulness, and it's almost, it really starts in our minds before we take on actions that, what we communicate, how we speak and write is so important to really be mindful of what it is that we're about to get ourselves involved in. Um, and I like what you said too earlier, Dr. Paleko, about, is this going to bring good or is this going to bring bad? Is it going to be something that we are going to, our body's going to reject, or is it not? What is it that we're consuming is something that we don't ask ourselves those questions enough because of a pace that we're in. We're moving in a very fast pace. So how do we, this is a question now leading into, how do we really check that pulse, if you will, if we're moving too fast? And maybe we don't realize we're moving too fast, but others see us moving too fast. What's a way so that we can sort of check ourselves before getting into this pathway of staying in this fast pace?
Yeah, I think there might be maybe some warning signs there if we are moving too fast. It might come in the form of us not sleeping very well, having restless sleep or having the inability to fall asleep. Our mind is racing. There's just so much going on. It might be our friends checking in on us. Hey, you haven't been yourself lately. Are you okay? It might be just us noticing maybe we're more clumsy than usual, or we're dropping the ball on certain things and not, getting things done on time or whatnot. Those might all be some warning signs that we might have maybe too much on our plate, or we've got too much going on. And so it might be time to reevaluate and reprioritize. What is it that I have going on in my life? Is there something I can take off my plate, or assign to somebody else? Maybe ask a friend for help with something, and reprioritize what's most important versus what's like maybe less important. And really, once you've done that, then you actually have time to really stop and think. We've got to like stop ourselves. Even if we're in a conversation, someone asks us a question, so much of the tendency is to immediately react. Especially if it's maybe a heightened emotional conversation, we want to react right away. But I want us to get in the habit of taking a breath and pausing before we respond. Like sometimes just doing that. You don't have to do it out loud. You can do it silently if you want. But doing that can just help you recenter and refocus yourself before you actually open your mouth and say something.
Amazing. Amazing. Absolutely right. I totally agree what you just said about the pausing. And also, even in just, sorry, this is a comment, but even in the communication aspect, I find that we talk so fast that the listener or the person that's hearing you needs at least 10 to 15 seconds just to process what you just said, then go
Mm-hmm.
into answering or replying your question. And you mentioned that earlier about the processing, allowing ourselves to process. It's going to result into a better response than being so reacting to that question, and it might not lead us to the best result. Um, so
Yeah,
thank you for that.
and
Yeah.
if I can just add one way to help you to buy you some time in that conversation to process
Mhm.
is to try and repeat back what that person just said.
Mm.
Say, okay, so I think what I hear you saying is,
Right.
try and repeat the key points of what they just said. And that is an opportunity for them to clarify.
Mm.
Oh, no, actually, what I meant is this. Or maybe they'll say, yes, that's exactly what I meant. But that gives you some time to really show that you're understanding what they're saying. Um, or
Yeah.
even asking them a question. What did you mean by that? That's another like technique, let's say in bystander intervention. Like if somebody, let's say, okay, your friend says an inappropriate, let's say a racist joke or a sexist joke or whatnot.
Mhm.
You interrupt them, you say, what did you mean by that?
Yeah.
And that's another way to, as opposed to just reacting to it.
That's right. Yeah. And another question too surfaced, Dr. Kaleko. Is there any literature you would recommend that would give us more information on how to improve our mental health?
Literature recommendations on mental health. Off the top of my head, can I think about that for a minute and get back to you with a list, because I want to really put some care into that recommendation. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you just did that right now.
see,
You staged it perfectly, because in my mind, that's exactly how you want to respond when we're not being into a reactionary state. If we don't know at this moment, it's okay to say that. Uh,
yes, don't panic if you don't know it immediately. Don't
right,
panic.
right.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more. And thank you for that, by the way. That's honestly going to be a true gift. The fact that we can get to hear back from you. Excellent. Um, so I have another question here. Allow me to read this one here. If we feel the need to help someone going through difficulties or having a hard time, what's the best way to go about it? That's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say the first step really is sitting with them and listening and
Mm.
being with them. Really, and by what I mean by that is hearing them out and letting them express what they need to express without trying to minimize their experience. So without saying, so here's some helpful things that you might say. Um, okay, so I hear that you're going through a really hard time right now, or this must be really difficult for you. Thank you for entrusting me to hear you out and to listen to you. And sometimes that person just needs somebody to listen in that moment.
Yeah.
They might not need advice. And if you're not sure, you can always ask them. You can say, are you looking for a listening ear right now, or are you looking for advice?
I love that.
And you ask
Yeah.
that question, then they'll tell you, they'll let you know what they need.
Mm.
Sometimes they do need advice.
Yeah.
And maybe, yeah. Those are some ways to start. I would never start by trying to give advice or trying to say, well, at least it's not, this,
Yeah. Fill in the blank. Yeah.
or be grateful that you have this. Those are examples of unhelpful things to say in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, well said. I mean, and I know, I'm an imperfect being, and I know I've fallen into those categories where I'm sure I've said those things where I want to immediately problem solve and get to the problem,
Yeah.
or get to the solving part of the problem. And really, it's not up to me to solve that problem. It's really hearing and listening, which I feel like are two different things, to have them really talk out loud so that way they have that ability to answer their own problem. Um,
Mhm.
so, and I love that you mentioned, and I know we're almost short on time, but I just want to touch on this if I may, that you mentioned earlier about therapy, that you wish you had done it 20 years ago, right?
Yes.
And that you also mentioned something even more courageous that I myself too would have to raise my hand and say, gosh, uh, I wish I had it earlier too. And how it has that negative stigmatism in a way that, oh, well, therapy is like for the people that are hopeless or really can't solve issues on themselves. And so we frown upon it in a way.
Mhm.
So please share like a little bit, if you don't mind inviting us. How did you know? What caused you to feel that you're at this point of readiness to enter therapy?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that looks different for everyone. For me personally, I've had a history of different, stuff going on with mental health,
Mhm.
depression during teenage years, and then when I was pregnant with my daughter, I lost my dad. He passed away from ALS.
Mm.
So I was going through this period of grief, and then after I had my daughter, I also had postpartum depression. And during that postpartum depression, I actually had, suicidal thoughts. That actually led me to contact the social worker at the hospital where I gave birth. Um, she said, "Okay, I think what you need is like a grief support group," because she knew I had lost my dad previously. So I started there. It was helpful up to a certain point, and then at some point I was like, okay, I think I'm no longer really getting much from this, so I stopped going. But I noticed in myself I had this continued kind of pattern of anxiety and um, blaming myself for certain things and just taking on like so much, just uh, um, I don't know, just like, yeah, taking on so much blame and guilt. I would say a lot of guilt. And so when this started, coming into my relationship with my husband and it started affecting our communication, that's when I was like, you know what? I need something, somebody's got to help me work through this because this is not me. So that was, for me, that was the point. But honestly, like I really, if I had started sooner and had, the knowledge and the resources, to seek an actual therapist sooner, I think like my experiences would have been completely different.
Mm. Yeah, and you mentioned tools. You take away tools.
Yes.
Even phrases that we incorporate in our language are some of those tool sets to give us that positive mind frame, so that we're able to really be able to cope and find those skill sets to cope when we're dealing with pressures and stresses that will unfortunately happen every day. uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that doesn't change those external factors. Only we can change ourselves. And so yeah, I completely commend you for that. I mean, gosh, when you shared that and you opened your heart there to share that with us, it invites me to even open my heart to say that as well. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, I do have to share to everybody. Thank you so much. Please show lots of love in the shout outs, in the chat box. We are concluding our time. Um, Go ahead, guys, go crazy. Dr. Kaleko, I can't thank you enough for coming on today and really giving some devotion and leading up to this wonderful presentation that you just delivered for us. We hope to have you back soon. I think more and more people need to hear this. Your work and what you're doing is very powerful. It's needed not just during this season, I think it's every season, and how we can actually stress manage and find ways in how we can transfer those tools and skill sets into the spaces that we enter. So thank you,
You're
Dr. Kaleko.
welcome. Can I just give them one like
Yes,
last?
please. Yes,
So I
please.
want you to know, if you are struggling, that you're not alone. You're not alone. That's why I'm sharing, my own personal stories. You're not alone. It's not your fault. And with help, you will get better.
Yeah, that's
So
right. That's right. And also a big thank you to Yusuf Andrews. He is a big piece of our production. Without him, we were not even able to produce and air this. So, Yusuf, thank you. I know you're listening over there. But thank you so much, everybody. Thank you and have a safe, wonderful weekend. Okay, take care.
Here. Bye.